was here in Portland, in a dark bar, underneath an Office Depot in the Pearl District. I'm a professional photographer, and the day before, I had taken pictures of an actress. I didn't know her at all, and she invited me to her birthday party the next day. And I went. I didn't know anybody there except for her, so I sat in the corner sulking, drinking my third Maker's Mark, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around, and there's a tall black man with a salt and pepper afro. He introduced himself. He said his name was Charles Perry. And I asked him what he did. He said he was a filmmaker. I said, "Oh, I'm a photographer. What are you working on?" He said, "I'm working on a documentary about black cowboys." Now, I had never heard those two words put together. I knew a thing or two about cowboys. I'd grown up watching Bonanza and Gunsmoke reruns and the Beverly Hillbillies, and my favorite movie growing up was Tombstone. Rest in peace, Val Kilmer. I'm your Huckleberry. But the only black cowboys that I'd ever seen were Sheriff Bart in Blazing Saddles and Cowboy Curtis on Pee-wee's Playhouse. So we kept talking, and he said, "Why don't you come with me to a black rodeo in Okmulgee, Oklahoma this summer?" I said, "Absolutely." I ran home, I bought my plane ticket, and I sat there waiting for this event. And August came around. I flew to Oklahoma City. I drove 90 minutes to Okmulgee, Oklahoma. I got out of my car. It was 105 degrees. It was 100% humidity. I was walking through the grass. Chiggers were biting my ankles. There were grasshoppers jumping on my clothes. There was a haze of barbecue smoke over the entire lawn. And there was R&B music and hip hop and gospel coming out of these horse trailers. And everywhere I looked, there were thousands of black cowboys. They were doing the Cupid shuffle in their boots. There were men riding their horses in basketball shorts and Jordans. There were women riding 50 miles an hour around the barrels with their braids blowing behind them and acrylic nails clutching the reins. I photographed that rodeo with absolute joy. And I went home and I edited the photos and realized that my cheeks were sore because I had been smiling all day long. This event gave a definition to how I grew up. I grew up in Kansas, single mom. My sister Carissa and I would run around in a 5-acre field behind our house. We picked blackberries, we'd run home through the thistle and pick thorns out of our socks on the front porch. At twilight, we'd run out and we'd catch fireflies in mason jars, screw the lid on tight, poke holes in the top so they could breathe, wake up the next morning to find them all dead. Down the street from us was Mr. Wills, and he raised cattle. And 2 doors down was Junebug, and he raised chickens. And being able to call them cowboys changed my definition of home away from a place of poverty and pain to a place of independence and grit and all of these things that I associated with the cowboys that I'd seen on TV. As a photographer, I was talented, but I lacked focus. I would shoot anything for money, a headshot, a wedding. But this rodeo, this culture, the fashion, the athleticism, they were all that I wanted to take pictures of. Everything that I looked at, the filigree on a saddle, hands tying a rope, they rewarded me with beautiful, epic photography. I started an Instagram account. I put the photos on there so that other people could experience this culture the same way that I did. And I started shooting on behalf of Western brands, or the Wranglers and the Boot Barns and the Ariats of the world. And a lot of times they would post the photos on Instagram, and that was the first time that they'd ever shown a black person on their account. I was in Houston shooting a campaign for Stetson. There's a bull rider named Ouncie Mitchell. And Ouncie was coming back from an injury. He was at a rodeo in Wheeling, West Virginia, and a bull had stepped on his femur and snapped it in half. Yeah. And it had been a year since he had ridden a bull, and this was the first time. He calmly climbed into the chutes, sat on his bull, nodded his head, the gate swung open, and he rode that bull for 8 seconds. 8 seconds is how long you have to ride a bull to get a qualifying score, for you that don't know. And it seems like a short amount of time until you're on a 2,000-pound beast that's really mad at you. Then you might as well be on there for a year. But he hopped off of that bull, landed on his feet, said, "Load another one." And he rode that bull. And he kept doing that all afternoon. After he was done, we sat on the bed of his truck getting to know each other, and he said, "I'm going to win the world championship in bull riding." That sounded insane to me because no black man had done that since 1982. But he quit his job, and he went on the road, going from rodeo to rodeo, sleeping in his truck, and he was doing really well. And he broke into the top 50 in the rankings, and they put his face on the website. And I called him. I said, "Ouncie, you did it. You're in the top 50. This is amazing." He said, "I told you I was going to win the world championship. I haven't done anything." And he kept riding. He went into the top 40, in the top 30, the top 20, all the while sleeping in his truck or staying with people that he really didn't know that well to get a meal and a warm shower. One of the women that he was staying with in Salt Lake City, Utah, got in a fight with him, and she shot him through the door, and he died in the hospital. I was destroyed by this. The whole community was. And I was sad because a 27-year-old man lost his life. And I realized that what had started out as a photography project was something much, much deeper than that. I had established strong relationships in this world. I had made friendships. And I felt like I needed to do something to make it easier for the next guy that wanted to win the world championship to accomplish his dream. These black cowboys are extraordinarily talented. They have a ton of passion for what they do. But they have very little resources to get where they want to go. I've seen cowboys walking down the street with their horse to get to the rodeo because their truck broke down. And I've seen cowgirls show up at the rodeo with no horse at all and borrow somebody else's, split the prize money with them when they win. There's a huge delta between these black cowboys and professional white cowboys. At a black rodeo, they might pay out $5,000, $10,000 in prize money across 9 events. At a similar pro rodeo, like the Pendleton Roundup, they'll pay out hundreds of thousands of dollars in prize money. But these black folks persevere, and they do it anyway because they love it, and they have a hoofprint on their heart. Seeing Ouncie get so close to this dream really lit a fire in me. And I decided I was going to do an event, and I decided that I was going to connect these athletes with sponsorships, I was going to connect them with big brands, and I was going to let them do their thing in front of thousands of people. And that was the birth of the 8 Seconds Juneteenth Rodeo. Thank you. Now, I had never planned a birthday party, but I decided I was going to do an event that was spiritually moving and physically powerful. I was going to do an event that had as much money as these big rodeos. It was going to be an immersive art experience. It was going to be a community builder. As a photographer, I wanted it to be stunningly beautiful in there. I wanted the light to be warm and directional. I wanted it to look like an old sports photo. I wanted it to look like Muhammad Ali standing over the top of Sonny Liston, glistening in the sweat with shadows and warmth, haze in the air from the cigarette smoke. And I wanted people to come into this place and experience this culture like the first time that I did in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. I wanted them to be doing the Cupid Shuffle in their boots. I wanted them to be taking selfies and connecting with people in their community. I wanted it to be the hypest family reunion ever. But first, I had to convince my wife. Heather and I had just had our third kid, Emmanuel, and I put him to bed one night, and I walked up to her sheepishly, and I said, baby, I need to do a rodeo. And not just any rodeo. It needs to be spiritually moving and physically powerful. It needs to be a big money event. And she said nothing. She stared at me for a long time in silence. And then finally she was like, do you feel like this is your calling? And I said, yes. She said, all right, then I'm with you. Let's get to work. We had to decide where to have this event. My first thought was, let's do it in Kansas City. That's where I'm from. The Cowboys are in Oklahoma. It'll be easy. But my hat and my heart were in Portland, Oregon. And I knew that doing it here would be remarkable. I knew that the black community here, while small, would show up powerfully for this event. And I knew that the press would go crazy for a black rodeo in exactly the wrong place. Then we had to get to work sourcing lighting. We had to source the dirt. We had to get the animals and the fencing and a venue. But most importantly, I had to get cowboys. I had to convince these cowboys to drive over the Rockies with their horse trailers and go to Portland, a place that they'd never thought about, and come to an event that they'd never heard about. I called each one of them on the phone, one by one, and told them why I was doing the event. I talked about Ouncie. And sometimes I just flat out begged them to come. And they said, Ivan, we're with you. Let's do this. Time flew, and it was the day of the event. And I was in the back. I had on my cowboy hat. And I was playing rodeo boss, and I was laying down the law, telling people how it was going to go, what the rules were, how the payout was going to work. And I got a text on my phone from one of the sponsors, and they said, we paid our fee. Now, I wasn't going to put up their banner until I got that money. So I had their banner sitting over in the corner, and I grabbed it and walked out into the arena. It was an hour before the show, and every single seat was filled. People were sitting butt to butt, shoulder to shoulder. They were dancing to the music of the DJ. They were taking selfies. They were hugging. The energy in that room was so electric. People were so excited. I just started to weep. People had actually showed up to support this thing with no knowledge of what it would be like. I pushed people out of the way. I hung up the banner. And then I went over to the announcer stand because I was the announcer that year because I couldn't find anybody else to do it. And I did a wonderful job. The event started and it was all a blur, but that year we paid out $60,000 in prize money. And I saw these athletes stay on the road all summer long, going from rodeo to rodeo. and they got their pro cards, and they upgraded their trailers and their horses. What we had set out to do, we had accomplished. The rodeo will always have a home in Portland, and we're doing it in Philadelphia this year. I'm taking the flame of my passion and igniting others one by one. In this culture, I've found a group of people that I can pour all of my passion and all of my energy into it. And in return, I get something that I care deeply about. I get to do for money what I would absolutely do for free. And I'm learning every day how to be a better father, how to be a better husband, and how to be a better rodeo boss. I'm 10 years in, and I don't know shit. And that's a wonderful place to be. So whatever you're passionate about, whatever you're called to do, mount up and let's get to work. Thank you.